5 years after divorcing his black ex-wife, a billionaire ranch owner freezes when he sees her standing on his land, with 3 little children who look exactly like him. But when she reveals the truth about why she left, his entire world turns upside down. Ethan's pulse quickened as he struggled to find the right words. The air between them was thick with tension and unspoken memories. The chirping of crickets and the distant hum of farm machinery only made the silence more unbearable. He wanted to ask 1,000 questions, but his mind was a whirlwind. How long had she been in town? Why hadn't she told him? And most of all, were those children really his? He finally managed to say, "You could have gone anywhere, Maya. Why come back here?" She looked at him for a long moment, her dark eyes calm but tired. "Because this is where it all started. And because I needed work. It's been hard, harder than I ever imagined." She hesitated, glancing at the kids who were now picking wildflowers by the fence. "I thought maybe, just maybe, you'd give me a chance. Not for me, but for them." Ethan's gaze shifted back to the children. The smallest boy was showing his siblings how to whistle through a blade of grass, just like Ethan used to as a child. Something deep inside him stirred, a mix of pride, confusion, and guilt. He swallowed hard, trying to keep his emotions hidden, but his voice cracked slightly when he spoke again. "You don't owe me an explanation, Maya," he said softly, though part of him desperately wanted one. "But those kids, they look—" "Don't," she interrupted quickly, her voice trembling. "Don't say it." He fell silent, realizing she wasn't ready to talk about it. He could see the exhaustion in her posture, the way she stood protectively near the children, as if shielding them from judgment. Ethan took a step back, realizing how strange this must have been for her, to come to his land after everything that had happened. "I never thought I'd see you again," he admitted, his tone quieter now. "When you left, I tried to find you. You disappeared without a trace." Maya looked down at the dusty ground, her hands tightening around the strap of her worn handbag. "I had to. You remember what it was like, Ethan. The whispers, the looks, your mother, your friends. I couldn't raise children in that kind of hate." Her words hit him harder than a punch. He had no defense because she was right. His family, proud of their wealth and reputation, had treated Maya as if she were a mistake he'd made. They never saw her intelligence, her compassion, her strength. All they saw was the color of her skin and the difference in their worlds. Ethan took a deep breath, guilt twisting in his chest. "You should have called me," he said finally, though his voice was barely above a whisper. "I would have helped you." "Would you?" she asked softly, raising her eyes to meet his. "Back then, you couldn't even stand up for me. You wanted to, I know you did, but you didn't. And I had to survive, Ethan. I had to protect them." Her words stung because they were true. Back then, he'd been too afraid of losing his mother's approval, too worried about what the town would think. He'd chosen silence over love, and he'd been paying for it ever since. He looked again at the 3 small faces watching from a distance. The little girl smiled shyly when he caught her eye, her dimple identical to his own. It sent a shiver through him. He wanted to ask her name, to kneel down and talk to her, but he stopped himself. He wasn't sure if he even had the right. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden glow across the fields. Ethan finally said, "You can stay for now. There's a small cottage by the stables. It's clean, and there's room for the kids. You'll get paid weekly." Maya looked surprised, unsure whether to accept the offer. "You don't have to do this out of pity," she said quietly. "It's not pity," he replied firmly. "You're the most capable person I know when it comes to horses. And it's the least I can do." She studied him for a moment, searching his eyes for sincerity. Then she nodded. "All right, thank you." As she turned to gather the children, Ethan stood still, watching her walk toward the barn with quiet grace. Each of the children clung to her hands, their laughter soft and innocent against the hum of the evening. Something in that moment made his heart ache, a deep, painful reminder of everything he'd thrown away. When the barn door creaked shut behind them, Ethan finally let out the breath he'd been holding. He stared at the spot where they'd stood, his thoughts spiraling. Could they really be his? And if they were, what kind of father had he become without even knowing it? The truth lingered just out of reach, like a shadow stretching over the fading light. He knew one thing for certain. Whatever had brought her back wasn't just about work. Something else was hidden beneath her calm words. Something she wasn't ready to share yet. As the stars began to appear, Ethan turned toward the farmhouse. But his heart remained out there, by the oak tree, with the woman he'd lost and 3 children who carried his eyes. Ethan sat behind his wide oak desk, pretending to review paperwork, but his eyes kept drifting toward the barn through the glass window. Every time Maya walked past, a wave of emotions washed over him. Guilt, nostalgia, confusion, and something else he'd buried long ago, love. He could see her working with the horses, gentle yet firm, just like she'd always been. She talked to them as though they understood every word, her voice low and soothing. Even the most restless stallions calmed under her care. It was the same gift that had drawn him to her years ago, her quiet strength, her ability to heal not just animals, but people too. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. His mind wouldn't stop replaying the past, the day they met at a local rodeo. She had been patching up a horse that had thrown its rider, her hands steady despite the chaos around her. He'd been impressed, maybe even a little intimidated. Maya had never been dazzled by his money or name. She treated him like any other man, and he'd loved that. But his family had seen her differently. To them, she was a scandal. A black woman with no social standing. Ethan, his mother had hissed one night. What will the board think? What will our friends say? He remembered how he'd defended Maya at first, boldly declaring that love didn't need approval. They'd eloped a few months later, in a small courthouse with only a couple of close friends. For a while, life had been perfect. Maya had made their home feel alive, full of laughter, warmth, and compassion. But slowly, the pressure began to build. His mother never stopped calling, never stopped interfering. She'd make comments at dinner parties, subtle, cutting remarks that left Maya silent and embarrassed. You must find all this overwhelming, dear, she'd say with a fake smile. Our world can be difficult for people like you. Ethan used to brush it off, telling Maya not to take it personally. But deep down, he knew she was being hurt. He just didn't have the courage to stand up to the people who controlled everything. His business, his reputation, even his future. Then came the argument that ended it all. He had just lost a major investment deal. His mother blamed Maya for distracting him. When Maya confronted him about it that night, he lashed out. Maybe they were right about you, he had shouted. The look on her face after he said it still haunted him. Shock, then pain, and then silence. She didn't cry, didn't argue. She simply packed a small bag and left before dawn. When he woke the next morning, she was gone. For months, he searched, hired private investigators, called hospitals, checked every veterinary clinic in 3 states. Nothing. It was as if she had vanished off the face of the earth. Eventually, he gave up, drowning himself in work and pretending he'd moved on. But the truth was, he'd never stopped thinking about her. Every time he passed the old oak tree by the barn, where she used to sit and watch the sunset, he felt the ache of what he'd lost. And now, 5 years later, there she was again, standing under that same tree, her children playing in grass. He rubbed his temples, trying to make sense of it all. Were those kids his? The thought scared him as much as it thrilled him. If they were, he'd miss their first words, their first birthdays, everything. And if they weren't, then whose were they? As he sat there lost in thought, a small knock came at his office door. It was one of the ranch hands. "Mr. Caldwell," the young man said, tipping his hat. "The new lady's doing wonders with the horses. Haven't seen them this calm in months." Ethan nodded absently. "Yeah, she's always had a way with them." The worker smiled. "You know her?" Ethan's lips curved slightly, though there was sadness in his eyes. "Better than I ever realized." After the man left, Ethan stood and looked out the window once more. The triplets were chasing each other through the tall grass while Maya brushed down one of the horses. She laughed at something one of the kids said, a sound that hit him straight in the chest. He thought about how hard those 5 years must have been for her, raising 3 children alone, without help, without him. He'd been surrounded by wealth, while she'd been surviving who knew where. The thought made his stomach twist. He didn't know how to fix things. He didn't even know if she'd ever forgive him. But as he watched her tuck a loose strand of hair behind her ear, he realized one thing for certain. He couldn't let her disappear again. The past had torn them apart. But maybe, just maybe, this unexpected reunion was his second chance to make things right. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the ranch, Ethan Caldwell silently promised himself he wouldn't waste it this time. The cool evening breeze carried the faint scent of hay and wildflowers through the barn. The soft light of the setting sun spilled across the wooden floor, painting long golden streaks between the beams. Ethan stood there, speechless, as Maya continued feeding the horses, her movements calm and steady, as though the conversation they were having wasn't breaking open 5 years of silence. He took a hesitant step forward, his boots crunching lightly on the straw. "Maya," he said again, his voice quieter this time, almost fragile. "All those years, I thought you were gone for good. I thought you didn't want anything to do with me." She gave a faint smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Wasn't that simple, Ethan? You think walking away was easy for me? I loved you. But love wasn't enough to survive the stares, the whispers, and the way your own mother looked at me like I was something to be ashamed of." Ethan lowered his head, shame burning through him. "You're right," he admitted, his voice heavy. "I let them treat you that way. I let her treat you that way. I was a coward." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The rhythmic sound of the horses chewing hay filled the silence. Then, one of the triplets, a little girl, wandered over, tugging gently at Maya's skirt. "Mama, I'm hungry," she said softly. Maya smiled, brushing the child's curly hair from her face. "All right, baby. We'll go eat soon." The girl's big brown eyes turned to Ethan, curious. "Who's that man, Mama?" The question struck him like a knife. Maya froze for a second, then knelt beside her daughter. "That's someone I used to know," she said carefully. Ethan felt his throat tighten. He wanted to say something, to tell the child who he really was, but he stayed silent, realizing this wasn't his moment to take. He'd already missed too many moments. After the girl ran back to her brothers, Maya stood and turned to Ethan. "They don't know anything," she said quietly. "I told them their father died before they were born. It was easier than explaining the truth." Ethan's eyes widened. "You told them I was dead?" Her expression hardened. "Would you rather I told them their father didn't care enough to fight for them? That he let their mother be humiliated and then walked away?" He flinched, the words hitting deeper than he expected. "No," he said finally, voice rough. "I guess I deserve that." Maya's shoulders softened. "Ethan, I didn't come back here to punish you. I just needed work. I needed a place where my children could have a roof over their heads and food on their table. I didn't plan on reopening old wounds." He nodded slowly, struggling to meet her gaze. "Still, I want to be part of their lives. I know I've got no right to ask, but I want to know them, Maya. Please." She studied him carefully, trying to read his face. For a moment, her expression was unreadable, but there was pain there, deep and raw. You think you could just walk back in and fix everything? It doesn't work that way. They're not some missing chapter in your story that you could just pick up again. They're real kids with feelings, with memories, with a mother who's done everything alone. I'm not asking to take anything from you, Ethan said, stepping closer. I just want to help. I want them to know who I am, who we are. Maya turned away, gripping the edge of a stall for support. Her silence said more than words ever could. The horses shuffled quietly, sensing the tension. Finally, she spoke, her voice trembling slightly. Do you have any idea what it was like? Carrying 3 babies alone? Working day and night? Praying they'd never have to face the same cruelty I did? You had the money, the comfort, the power, and I had to scrape by, terrified that one day they'd ask questions I couldn't answer. Ethan's eyes glistened. You shouldn't have had to go through that alone, he whispered. I wish I could change the past. You can't, she said firmly. But maybe you can decide what kind of man you want to be now. Her words hung in the air like a challenge. Ethan looked down, taking in the sight of his calloused hands, stained from years of ranch work and regret. Then let me start by doing one thing right, he said quietly. Let me be there. For them, for you, for whatever comes next. Maya hesitated, torn between caution and the faint spark of something she'd buried long ago. For years, she'd promised herself never to rely on Ethan again. But the sincerity in his eyes, the kind she hadn't seen in a long time, made her wonder if people really could change. I don't know if I can trust you, she said finally. But the kids need stability. If you mean what you say, then prove it. Not with words, with actions. Ethan nodded. I will. As she turned to gather her children, he stood there, watching the fading sunlight glint off her hair. The triplets ran to her, laughing, unaware of the heavy conversation that had just taken place. Ethan exhaled slowly. For the first time in years, he felt something stirring inside him. Hope. Not the naive kind he once had, but the kind that grows in the ruins of mistakes. As night fell over the ranch, he silently vowed that he would earn back the trust of the woman he'd broken and the love of the children he'd never known. The air seemed to freeze between them as Margaret Caldwell's glare darted from her son to Maya, then to the children standing a few feet away. The triplets had been playing in the dirt with toy horses, but now they stood silently, sensing the tension. The eldest boy clutched his sister's hand tightly, watching the angry woman with wide eyes. Your kids, Margaret repeated, her voice sharp with disbelief. Don't you dare tell me those children belong to you, Ethan. This is ridiculous. You've completely lost your mind. Ethan took a slow, steady breath. He'd spent his whole life obeying his mother, letting her dictate his choices, his relationships, even his emotions. But not today. Not anymore. Yes, he said clearly, meeting her eyes without flinching. They're mine. Every single one of them. Margaret scoffed, her expensive heels crunching against the gravel as she stepped closer. This woman humiliated you once. She ran off and came crawling back only because she needs something. You can't possibly believe. That's enough, Mother. Ethan's voice cracked through the still air like a whip. It startled even the horses in the nearby stables. He'd never raised his voice to her before, but the time for silence was over. Maya stood quietly, holding her ground, her posture straight and her eyes calm. She didn't interrupt. She didn't need to. Her strength spoke louder than any argument could. Ethan turned to his mother again. You don't get to talk about her that way. Not anymore. You never saw her for who she truly was, because you never wanted to. All you cared about was how things looked, about what the neighbors thought. You ruined my marriage with your hate, and I let you. But I won't make that mistake again. Margaret's lips quivered as she tried to compose herself. I did what any mother would do. I was protecting you. From her, from the scandal she brought into our family. Ethan shook his head, his voice low but steady. You were protecting your ego, not me. And the only scandal here is the way you treated someone who did nothing but love me. For a moment, Margaret's mask slipped, revealing the smallest flicker of doubt. But it vanished as quickly as it came. So what now? She asked bitterly. You're going to let her live here? Let those children carry the Caldwell name? He looked over at the three little ones, their faces full of confusion, but also curiosity. Then he turned back to his mother. Yes, he said firmly. They already do. The color drained from her face. You'll regret this, she hissed. You'll regret throwing away everything your father built. Ethan's expression softened for the first time. Dad built more than just a business, Mother. He built this land with his hands. He believed in decency, in hard work, in giving people a chance. Somewhere along the way, we forgot that. Maybe it's time to remember. Margaret looked like she wanted to argue, but the words wouldn't come. Her gaze shifted toward Maya, who still stood silent, composed, and unbroken. The strength in her calmness only made Margaret more uneasy. Without another word, she turned sharply and walked toward her car, her heels echoing against the dirt. As her luxury sedan disappeared down the long driveway, Ethan exhaled deeply, tension leaving his body in waves. He turned toward Maya, who had quietly guided the children back toward the porch. I'm sorry you had to see that, he said softly. Maya shook her head. You don't need to apologize. I've faced worse than words. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Still, thank you for standing by me, even just now. Her eyes softened, and a faint smile tugged at her lips. You didn't need me to say anything. You said what needed to be said. The children peeked from behind her skirt, unsure whether it was safe to come closer. Ethan knelt down, smiling gently. Hey, he said, his tone warm. You guys okay? The little girl nodded shyly. Was that lady mad? He chuckled lightly. Yeah, a little, but she'll be fine. Grown-ups just argue sometimes. The smallest boy tilted his head. You're not mad. Ethan shook his head. Not anymore. Then he looked at Maya and added quietly, I'm just done letting anger run this family. Maya studied him for a moment, her heart softening in spite of herself. The man standing before her wasn't the same one who'd let pride and fear ruin everything years ago. This Ethan was humbler, grounded, a man finally learning what mattered. Later that evening, as the sun melted into the horizon, the family sat on the porch steps together. The children giggled as Ethan told them stories about the ranch, how their mother once helped deliver a calf during a thunderstorm, how she once tamed the wildest horse he'd ever seen. Maya listened quietly, her eyes reflecting the fading orange light. It had been years since laughter had filled this place. Now it sounded like healing. For the first time in his life, Ethan didn't feel torn between love and loyalty, between family and pride. He knew exactly where he stood and who he stood beside. And when Maya glanced at him, a small, knowing smile in her eyes, he realized that maybe forgiveness wasn't something you begged for. It was something you earned, one honest moment at a time. The morning sun painted the ranch in soft shades of gold, glimmering across the fields where dew still clung to the grass. It was the kind of morning Ethan Caldwell used to face alone, with only silence and the sound of cattle in the distance. But now, the air was filled with laughter, the sound of three little voices calling out to him, the soft hum of life that had returned to his land and his heart. He stood there, watching Maya from a few steps away. She was kneeling beside the children, showing them how to feed the chickens. Her voice was gentle but firm, her patience endless. The kids, little copies of both of them, clung to every word she said. Ethan couldn't help but smile. For years, he'd convinced himself that he was content living for his work. But now he realized this was what he'd been missing all along. Family. Taking a deep breath, he gathered his courage. He had rehearsed the words in his mind 1,000 times since she came back. But now, standing before her, his heart thudded nervously in his chest. Maya. He began softly, his voice steady but full of emotion. She turned, wiping her hands on her jeans. Yes, Ethan. He glanced at the kids and then back at her. I've spent years working to build this ranch, to prove something to my family, to the town, maybe even to myself. But none of it means a thing without you and our kids here. He paused, his throat tightening. I can't undo what I did. I can't erase the pain I caused. But I can try every single day to make it right, to build something real again. With you. Maya looked at him quietly, her eyes glistening. For a moment, the only sounds were the wind brushing through the tall grass and the soft laughter of their children playing nearby. Ethan, she said finally, her voice trembling just a little. When I left, I told myself I'd never come back. I didn't think I could face this place again, or you. But watching you with them these past few weeks, seeing how gentle you are, how much you've changed, made me realize something. He waited, his heart pounding. She took a small step closer. I didn't come back for forgiveness. I came because I wanted our children to know where they came from, to know their father. But maybe, she smiled softly through her tears, maybe this is where we all belong. Before Ethan could reply, the triplets came running toward them, their tiny boots thudding against the dirt. One of them, Liam, grabbed Ethan's leg, while the others clung to Maya's hands. Mommy, Daddy, look. We found a baby chick, one of the girls exclaimed, holding up her small hands. Ethan crouched down, his heart swelling as he looked at them, all of them together for the first time, really together. He placed a gentle hand on the girl's head. That's a strong little chick, sweetheart, just like you. The kids giggled, and Maya's laughter joined theirs, a sound Ethan hadn't realized he'd missed more than anything else in the world. He looked up at her, his eyes filled with gratitude and something deeper, hope. Maya, I know rebuilding what we had won't be easy. I've made mistakes I can never take back. But I'm not that same man anymore. I don't care what anyone says, not my mother, not this town. You and these kids, you're my family. And that's all that matters now. Maya nodded slowly, her hand reaching for his. Then let's take it one day at a time, she whispered. Ethan smiled, a real, heartfelt smile that reached his eyes for the first time in years. One day at a time, he repeated. The triplets, sensing the tenderness between their parents, wrapped their small arms around both of them, forming a circle of warmth and love. Ethan held them close, feeling the weight of every lost year melt away in that moment. The sun rose higher, washing the ranch in radiant light. Horses neighed in the distance, and the scent of freshly turned soil drifted through the air. Everything felt alive, new. Maya looked around, her voice soft but filled with meaning. It's funny, she said. When I left, I thought this place only held pain for me. But now it feels different. Like maybe it's where we were always meant to end up. Ethan squeezed her hand gently. Maybe we just needed time to find a way back. As the children ran off again, chasing the chickens across the yard, Maya leaned against the fence beside him. They stood there together, watching the life they'd created unfold before their eyes. For the first time, Ethan didn't think about his business, his reputation, or the expectations that once chained him down. He thought only of the woman beside him, the woman who'd taught him what strength really looked like. Because sometimes love doesn't fade with time. It waits quietly, patiently, for the right moment to bloom again. And on that golden Texas morning, surrounded by laughter, forgiveness, and the sound of tiny footsteps, Ethan Caldwell finally understood. Home wasn't the land, or the house, or even the fortune he'd built. Home was them. And after all those years apart, love had finally found its way home. If you found this story inspiring, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss another powerful video. Thanks for watching.